Shoes Beach House is a very highly regarded dream pop shoegaze band that have been prolific for many years now. They've been dropping some very syrupy, beautiful, orgasmic music since like the early to mid 2000s. 2006 I think their debut was, and they've been like the indie darling. What is going on with my hair? Just ignore that part. The indie darlings for a long time. They've been highly regarded, critically acclaimed, praised by every reviewer under the sun, and for very good reason. I mean, oh my god, some of their albums like Devotion and Teen Dream I think are some of the best of those respective years they came out, without a doubt. I enjoyed Bloom too, not really that big on it, and their debut actually is pretty overlooked when discussing Beach House. Not a great album, but it's still pretty good. Then we had Depression Cherry and Thank Your Lucky Stars in 2015. Both albums sort of seem mixed to positive reviews. Obviously your pitchforks love the shit out of it and put it in their like best 50 albums of the year, as you'd expect, but that's not necessarily to discredit what they do anyway. It's just one of those, yeah, I kind of knew a best new music was coming for this album, like predictable, you know, and it split a lot of people. I mean, some people were starting to get bored of the sound. The two albums came close together and neither of them offered that much difference, to be honest. It's pretty safe to say that I, for one, was one of those skeptics. I mean, on first few listens, yeah, those albums were really lovely, just like you get from a Beach House album, but in terms of what I kind of wanted from those albums, I didn't really get, and I'm going to discuss more of that for this review, because I'm kind of the same here. I would argue that I get more enjoyment from this album than I do Depression Cherry. 7 is certainly a beautiful album. There are certainly some sounds as well that feel very different to what they've done before, and I don't know what it is, but it might be the way that they've been recorded in sort of like a muddy way that gives them this different type of sound that can't be quite branded as shoegaze, but I can't quite place what it is. And yeah, you know, you get the amazing vocals from Victoria as always. I believe she's singing in French on some of these tracks too. Of course, there's just so much about her that you can love, you know? And even when you can't quite hear what she's saying, you just know that no matter what it is that she's saying, it's just absolutely filled with the most passionate delivery you could possibly imagine, and the most pained at times as well. There's a pain to her voice, there's like anguish, but it's like in her mind she just doesn't want to make you feel worse. Like she's got this idea in her head, like, I have to sing in the most beautiful way to please the people around me, even if like what I'm saying isn't that happy or whatever. And I've always appreciated that about her, because I feel like she's all there just to make everything nice, you know? There's such a genuineness to her voice that I don't think I'll ever forget or ever let go of. And even on albums that I don't particularly enjoy that much, if I put them on right now in the background, I'd get that from Victoria as a singer. And like I said, there are certainly some cool, intricate ideas and soundscapes going on in this album that I can't deny. You know, certainly very different from your average shoegaze album, I must admit. I mean, this isn't just run-of-the-mill shoegaze that you've heard all before. It's something that I think that is very specific, you know? It's a very specific sounding album. I think if you put this on for someone that's never heard of shoegaze, they probably wouldn't really be able to pin down what's going on, whereas I think if you put on some like Slow Dive or some Ride, I think they'd be able to pinpoint some elements that are going on within the music, even though they're kind of in the same world. Now I kind of have to go off on what I've said and just go into all my issues, because I don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm going to try and explain what I think it is, but I think it's going to come out as bullshit. Here's the thing, right? When I was 15, I fucking loved Kerrang. When I was 15, the only stuff I listened to was alternative rock, and not even like the alternative rock that I may find more interesting now, more of like the radio friendly type shit that hit Kerrang, hit Scuzz. If you're from the UK, you may remember Scuzz TV. Pop punk, even a bit of emo, dabbling in all those kind of areas within the cringy rock fest that I lived in back in like whenever it was, and back when I was 15, like 8 years ago, or whatever. And that was all very of the time, okay? I don't really appreciate much of that anymore, even though I do still occasionally enjoy a Green Day song, a Blink-182 song. You know, My Chemical Romance's Black Parade is still a great album. You know, there are some things from that time that I will enjoy now, even though I look back at it and think, yeah, I've outgrown it. I've outgrown all of that. So I've outgrown all of that, and let's fast forward it 4 years from 15, when I was 19. Probably about a year or so after I just properly, like, got into music. Like, I was all over the place with what I was listening to every type of genre, just learning more and more and more about music. And around that time, I was a bit of a Pitchfork hipster. So anything that Pitchfork told me that was great, I kind of went along with the ride and just jumped on board and listened to whatever they were giving best new musics to. Went back and read through all their lists, their best of the decades, and you know, there's a lot of credibility to a lot of what they say. I can't deny, like, they're not wrong. I mean, they're just, the way they do things is sometimes irritating, and I know a lot of people have started to see that with them. Like I said, I was a bit of an indie hipster. They had that indie hipster cred from the 2000s, and so one of the bands that they praised a lot was Beach House, and I listened to them, loved them, thought they were great, but, you know, that's 4 years ago, and things have kind of changed for me. So back then, when I first heard Bloom, it was mind-blowing. Whereas now, I don't really rate that album that much, and honestly, wasn't really a highlight for 2012, or even a highlight for Beach House in general. Even though I still do believe that Devotion is amazing, and I've got that shit on vinyl in my thing down there, my shelf thing, and Teen Dream is like one of the best albums of 2010, maybe even this decade. I'm sure by the time I get to the decade end list or whatever, that'll be high on my list. But it's just that, you know, I don't appreciate what they're doing as much as I did then, because we're 4 years on from that, and like, you know, there's a bit of a trend here. Every 4 years I seem to have a different perspective on certain albums. Some albums stick and some albums die off. And unfortunately, I think we're at this point in Beach House's career where their albums are just starting to die off for me. Depression Cherry was a rehash of ideas, whereas this one is essentially doing what they've done before, but just throwing on even more reverb. Like, I feel like the reverb is just overkill on this album. Everything is completely just drenched in reverb. And I feel like if you took the reverb away, you would actually have something more tangible for this album, surely. Because Teen Dream didn't have as much reverb, and that's their best album by far. So what is it that makes them think throwing all this in is that enjoyable? I just don't get how you can listen to this and think like, oh yeah, this is a great piece of music, when so many layers are being covered up. Like, if you picked apart those layers, I feel like you'd unravel something truly amazing. But they still haven't got over that time in their careers where this was their sort of sound. I just feel like they should have done something a bit different by now. I'm not trying to discredit the art that they're crafting, because, you know, do whatever you want. I mean, I'm just a guy on YouTube telling you my opinions, but like, as a fan, I feel like they're over a decade into their career. I just would have wanted something a bit different by now. It's getting tiresome, man. I want something different. I mean, it's like an AC/DC album. Like, you know what you're gonna get every fucking album. It's just the same shit over and over again. But because these guys are a bit indie and hipster, they get away with it, and they'll get praised no matter what. But because AC/DC is considered dad rock, then we somehow view it as lame, Whereas this is the same thing. It's the same. What's different about this? I mean, the sound of the music is obviously different, but what's different from this than their 2008 album Devotion? Like, it's really very similar. Now, there are two interesting things about this album being called Seven. The first of all being that the fact that this is their seventh album is pretty mind-blowing, but also so many of these shoegaze bands that these guys have been influenced by from the 90s actually never even made it to 7 albums, which is really crazy when you think about it. You know, like bands like Mazzy Star, Slow Dive, Ride, My Bloody Valentine. And so it's pretty interesting to kind of think like, oh my god, those bands never even got to 7 albums, yet they're the legendary artists that crafted this genre and made it what it was. So I kind of feel like, hold on, if these guys had continued through the 90s, like making records and into the 2000s and even to now, and like got to like 13 albums or whatever, or maybe even 10, then how would we view this genre of music? Because I don't think we'd have it as highly regarded if they'd have continued making music, but it just so happens that so many of these bands cut off at like 3 albums, so we have those classics in mind, but we never really got to see how things would have changed if they continued every couple of years. And I feel like that adds to the mysteriousness of the genre, honestly. Like the lack of albums from those legendary artists. I feel like it does add something to the sound, because when you hear it, it's like, oh, you're hearing it for the first time again, because it's not like you're hearing it over and over again, redone, like not reinterpreted, but like rehashed, that kind of thing. But with Beach House, it's like exactly that, you know, it's rehashed because they've done so many albums. And I'm not saying that they should stop, but I'm just saying, like, in this genre, that is a very rare thing to have this kind of output from a band. So that might be why I'm at this point with them, I don't know. And I said there were two interesting things, but honestly that was kind of a lie, because the other interesting thing I was going to mention was that they're at 7 albums in and things really haven't changed all that much, but that's not that interesting, it's just me moaning. Sorry, I'm just moaning. Look, the thing is that I don't really need to keep talking, because I feel like I've basically given how I feel about this album. I haven't really talked about the music all that much, but I'm just making that a point, you know? That's my point, not to talk about the music, because there isn't much to say. You really know what you're gonna get. If you know this band already, I'm sure you will be if you've clicked on this video, but like, for me, it's just kind of the same again. And the same again is actually not bad. So like, they haven't really put out a bad album, I wouldn't say. The same again is actually pretty decent overall, because like I said, even Depression Cherry wasn't that amazing, but I pulled out of the album thinking positive things because I enjoy the sound. It's a nice aesthetic, it's a nice overall atmosphere. But when you've heard it this many times without that much change, it kind of lets you down. I'd say pull away from the reverb now, guys. Try something a bit different. Put Victoria's vocals up front like you did on Team Dream and see if you can replicate what they did there, because that was amazing, and I'm sure if they did it again it would be fantastic too. But for now, it's just a pretty okay release that I somewhat enjoy when it's on, but it's background music essentially, so I'm going to go a C. I'm sorry for this very rambly and uninformative review, but you know, again, like I said, I've gotten to that point where I just feel like there's not much to say about the music. Yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you're angry, let me know too. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this review. I'm sure you didn't, but do have a good day, and yeah, just let me know. Let me know.